Hello and welcome back to the Red Mars podcast. I'm your host, Astro Jake, and it has been a while since I've been on here talking with everyone. I do apologize. It's been a busy little while here over at my place. I had some interesting incidents happen last week with a car breaking down. I blew out my master clutch cylinder, and then while I was getting towed home, they dropped my car off in my driveway, and they accidentally backed it into my house. So been dealing with some of that stuff, which took up some of my time, unfortunately. But we got some good stuff for you today. It's going to be a quick one, but a fun one. And kind of what we got is some talks about electric vehicles, not quite space-related, but it will kind of drive the conversation leading into some space rovers, and then we'll talk a bit about some space habitats and whatnot. The reason I want to talk about some of these electric vehicles is there's a new company that came out, found it super interesting, and thought I'd share with all of you. And I actually didn't know that, electric vehicles are nothing new here in the U.S. or really the rest of the world. And most vehicles in the early 1900s, even late 1800s, were actually electric. So very interesting, and we're going to talk all about that here very shortly. So stay tuned, join, and I hope you enjoy this episode. All right, let's get this party rolling here. So let's talk about electric cars. So I found this article that kind of helps talk about this story here. I was looking online, saw some things on social media, and just wanted to kind of share some of this. And in the light of space, we got Ancient Aliens on here. Cool advertising if you've never watched Ancient Aliens. Interesting, a lot of conspiracy, but also a lot of good thought experiments, I guess you could say, to think about what if it were true. So anyways, let's talk about electric cars. So electric vehicles were some of the earliest automobiles ever invented, and unlike early gas-powered cars, they didn't require a crank to start the engine. Now, you may think, okay, electric vehicles, wonder how fast they went, how far did they go, what are all these things? So these are all the questions I had when I started looking into this, and the ranges were surprisingly interesting in that compared to a Nissan Leaf. So you could go 80 miles on a charge. How fantastic. Now, the issue was you weren't getting there too fast. So you might be able to do 80 miles, but you're only going to get there at about 20 miles an hour if you're lucky. That's with some of the good ones. And then the other issue that came with these was the cost. So ultimately what ended up happening, to kind of skip forward here and why we don't see, or they didn't really take off, these electric vehicles, well, it was due to the fact that cost of an electric vehicle, even as it is today, really, was quite expensive. The cost of mining the materials, sheer just building these things, and the technology that went into them was so much more expensive compared to that of a gas-burning engine. And so that internal combustion technology won out in the kind of trade war that was going on there, and it won. So that is kind of what happened there, and we saw the die-out of electric vehicles around, early 1920s-ish, and that's what happened. And really, I'm not really sure if this is going to give me copyright here with this little video playing down here, so I'm going to close that out. But pretty much what they're saying is that when Henry Ford came along and developed the Ford Model T, I believe it was, and had these internal combustion engines, they were able to sell these vehicles for a cost of, I'm not sure if they have it in here, but if I can think of, well, I would say maybe around $600 or so is what the cost of a vehicle is. Imagine that today. That would have been fantastic. But anyways, $600 for an entire vehicle, whereas an electric vehicle, the batteries alone, I believe, were costing around $600. So you get a fully functioning vehicle that you can go put some cheap gas in and go for a drive at a faster-ish speed and have a farther range where you don't need to worry about recharging, or you can go and pay $600 for some batteries for a electric vehicle, and you don't even get the vehicle for that price. So you're much more expensive and not quite the return that you'd be hoping for. But if we look here, 1859, yeah, we're going into the 1800s. Gaston Plante makes the first rechargeable battery. So the development of electric vehicles in the 19th century closely tracks the evolution of the battery technology. Anderson's electric carriage wasn't practical, but its battery was only good for one charge and then needed to be replaced. Imagine having to spend $600 every time you want to keep going somewhere. Not really the way you want to do things. So that changed in 1859, though, when French chemist Gaston Plante came up with a lead acid battery that could be recharged indefinitely, more or less indefinitely. So Plante demonstrated his lead-acid technology for the French Academy of Sciences in 1860. Not only did the battery deliver a more powerful charge than previous batteries, but the flow of electrons could be reversed to recharge the battery from an outside electrical source. Sounds familiar? Even today, the standard 12-volt car battery in gas-powered vehicles is a lead-acid battery. Yes, the vehicle or the battery in your car is a rechargeable battery. That is why you have an alternator to run off the rotation of your gas-powered engine, which then in turn feeds the electrons back into the battery that allows you to recharge that battery so you can start your car up again the next time you get in it. All right. We're not going to go too far into this because this podcast isn't about electric vehicles, but I just wanted to share that this is kind of cool and kind of how this kept going. So, yeah, the first electric car displayed in America, 1893. This is nothing new, just a blast from the past. You know, it's kind of the pattern with all of these podcasts is it's nothing new. It's just blast from the past coming back and trying again, you know. Cycles repeat, as is everything that we know it to be in existence today. So that brings me to this next page here, which is Slate Auto. So many of you have probably seen this. It's been pretty large on social media, blowing up all over the place. But this is a company, Slate, which I believe comes from clean slate. You have a blank slate, or probably blank slate. It's probably easier, better way to describe this. But you're given this truck, and they only sell one truck. But this truck can be converted into many different things. You can have an SUV. You can have a beach vehicle. Go drive on Daytona Beach and go for a surf, or if you're out on the West Coast, Malibu or something like that. Looks kind of fun. Then you have your kind of, almost looks like a Ford Bronco style. I love the kind of boxier look here. Also very neat. Go back with your traditional. This kind of reminds me of the old Datsun, box body kind of truck. And then you have this look, kind of looks like a Toyota FJ, getting ready to, go to the hill. Lots of customizations. And that's the whole point of Slate Auto is you really have limitless customizable options for this vehicle. You build it to what you want or what you don't want, and you have fun with it. So you have one truck that is built in this modular way that you can just keep building and building and building and building and make it what you want it to be. It can be as cheap or as expensive as you want it to be. And I think this is such a great idea. And because of that, I went and jumped on the bandwagon pretty early on and decided to pre-order one. So it's just an initial kind of show or reservation of, hey, I'm interested. It was about $50 when I put it through. I believe it's probably about the same still. If you click reserve, let's take a look. Still $50, so plenty out there. Definitely encourage you to go take a look. If you've been interested in, hey, maybe an electric vehicle, but you think they are too expensive, like they always seem to have been, these ones are not quite that expensive. I think the targeted price is around $28,000, I believe, somewhere around there. And then there is incentives and that put on top of that for electric vehicles, which brings them down closer to that $20,000 range. To give you an idea of how much things cost, I bought a 2016 Subaru WRX a couple years ago, and less than 80,000 miles on it, whatnot. With tax and everything, I paid $19,000. So $19,000 for a 2016 WRX, or you can go and get a electric truck that can be what you want it to be for close to $20,000, really. Here's some comparisons, though. The Chevy Silverado EV, you can see it's outlined in white here, size comparison. Ford Maverick, and the old Toyota SR5 pickup, which I actually really love the old SR5. They're a great truck. And it's Toyota, which lasts forever. So this is your electric version, slightly larger truck that should be able to do the same type of thing. And here you go. You have the SUV style, much bigger than a Kia Soul, about the size of a Jeep Wrangler two-door, not quite the size of a Chrysler Pacifica. But still, again, all kinds of stuff that you can customize on it, makes them a lot of fun. Now, this isn't going to be your 400-mile range that you'd get out of some of the more expensive electric vehicles, but it gives you what you need. So most people, I think that this is where they kind of came up with the idea of, or not maybe the idea, but the requirements around the range in that for the vehicle. Standard battery here, they're saying 150 miles, extended battery 240. I would go with the extended battery of 240 because I live in Florida here and some cities are pretty far apart. So I'd want to be able at least to get to the next one or to the next charging station. It's a single 150 kilowatt rear-mounted motor. I think the 0 to 60 times are around 8 seconds, so obviously it's not a race car. But to be honest, if you're buying one of these, you're not buying it because you want a race car. You're buying it because you want something you don't got to put gas in. You want something that's not super expensive. It's something you can customize and make your own and enjoy, and that's really what this is. And I just think it's pretty awesome. So, yeah, we got maximum payload around 1,400 pounds, towing capacity around another 1,000 pounds, all your standard safety, charging here. So, connectors and NACS with DC fast charger. Here you go. Level 2, you have your AC charger at 25 to 40 miles per hour of charge. Full charge is roughly 48 hours, so you come home after your day, plug it in, and away you go. Level 3, you get 20 to 80% charge in 30 minutes, so that's pretty impressive right there. And again, so where the range came from, you look at how far does somebody typically drive in their average day going to and from work. You're not doing, well, most people aren't doing, an 80-mile drive one way or something like that. You're looking at average. I believe they say the average American drives around 30 miles one way to work and then 30 miles back. So you're at 60 miles. So you're about half of that range of what you expect to get out of the regular 150-mile battery capacity. So really, it's not too bad. You just come home, maybe you need to go out and get some groceries at the end of the day, run a few errands. You can do all that still with your single charge. Plug it in, 4 hours overnight, wake up the next morning, do it again. Never have to look at a gas station again. So I think that's pretty incredible. So it's definitely a good option for if anybody's looking at it out there. We won't talk about this anymore. Definitely not sponsored or anything by Slate, but very supportive because I think this is a great way to get electric vehicles in the hands of people that can actually afford them rather than it being just a luxury item for people who've got some, money to spare or to throw around, really. I wanted to get one. I looked at the Cybertruck. When it came to price it out at the end, it was way too much money, especially for what we were getting and all the issues you were seeing with them. And I think mine priced out at $120,000. For $120,000, I'll go get a Lotus Emira and have a lot of fun and pay the gas. So just my 2 cents, but I think this is a good option. So anyways, where does that bring us to? Well, that brings us to Lunar Terrain Vehicles, and it's quite the segue, I know. So I was looking at some of this stuff because I was actually looking at but habitats you can live in on other planets, and I've always been interested in this. There's Orbital Reef and Bigelow and all these other habitats for in space, on planet, and whatnot. And we've talked about these in some other episodes, but we haven't really gone into depth of what it looks like to build one of these, say, on the moon. And with all these missions to the moon in the next, 5-10 years, with the new presidency here in the U.S., the new administration talking about going to the moon again, going to Mars, all in this term. Well, term's only 4 years. That's a lot to go down in such a short period of time. So very excited to see where things go. But with that, you build a habitat you're going to want to explore, and looking at the previous rovers and that uncrewed, or the rovers that were part of the lunar program, and what technologies we have today, it's got me thinking that, there's probably some pretty cool stuff out there. So here you can see some of the new LTVs, or lunar transportation vehicles, lunar terrain vehicles. That they've been working on. There's some cool designs. Some of them look pretty futuristic. Some of them look like a buggy. And let's see, where did I have it? It might be back a page here. No, it's not. All right, that's fine. We'll just look at these ones here. NASA had some other images and background on the LTV and kind of what to expect. But just wanted to show these images here. More or less, it looks like a buggy for the beach, but made for the moon. Obviously, it's got a lot of key characteristics. Here you go. So NASA makes progress with the new Lunar Terrain Vehicle Moon Rover services. So this looks like a cool little buggy you would see at the beach, but it's a cool render. So the render here, just for those that are listening, is described as astronauts explore the South Pole region of the moon during Artemis missions. They'll be able to go farther and conduct more science than ever before thanks to the new Lunar Terrain Vehicle, LTV. Instead of owning the vehicle, NASA plans to contract its services from the industry. And that's a very common pattern these days, where NASA will put out open up for a bid for, say, this is what we want to build, create this RFP and say, we need a new rover. Can you build me one? And go to the private industry market and say, show me your designs. You do all the work. We'll supply the funding. And then that way you bring in all these other companies. Some of them might be smaller companies, larger companies, whatnot, but everyone's open to the bid to then provide their solutions to the problems that we need to solve here. So it's a great way for the government to involve all these other companies to kind of have a piece of the pie, especially when it comes to space exploration, and no longer just for NASA astronauts. It's now for really anybody that is willing to put in the work to get there. So all these private companies, you can go create an LLC yourself if you wanted to, and subcontract your services to NASA. There's all open as long as you have the expertise needed to meet it, and you can provide the level of detail of your design to really back it. You could end up with a contract from NASA to build the next piece of space technology. And it's super cool, and I've been looking at possibly doing some of that myself for some other areas of my expertise, and I think it would be really cool. And for those that don't know, Red Mars Podcast is also a spinoff of an LLC that I own. I actually own redmars.com. That's where I post all of my podcasts too, but it's also a registered LLC that I could technically do work with, say, moon rovers or something like that, and contract my services to NASA to build out specific parts. Obviously, as a one-man show, I'm not able to build out a full rover, especially in the time durations that they need. This is looking for a 2028 time frame, but I could definitely build out, say, a certain mechanism or something like that to help contribute to the overall project. But that's kind of cool. So this was where I kind of ended up with this and kind of segued from the electric vehicles. Not too much information on this right now because this actually was an RFP that went out and people were able to bid on and provide their solutions to this vehicle that they could then build for NASA as a contract company. So very cool. I think that whatever this comes to be is going to be very advanced, especially with the technologies we have today compared to, say, the Apollo program. Obviously, we have a lot of harsh space environment we have to deal with, but yeah, I got faith in those that are building this, and I think it'll be a really cool project. So moving on to lunar living. So this is kind of what I was talking about. We chatted about some of these in orbit or on orbit space concepts for habitats, rotating environments, which I believe they're planning to put one up in 2028, or at least start putting one up in 2028, which is super interesting. We've got these space balloons that go up into the high parts of the stratosphere that can see the curvature of the Earth for, go for dinner service or something like that. You have programs like New Shepard. Yes, it's real. New Glenn starting to launch again. We had our first launch. They're putting another launch up soon. That'll be part of the Artemis missions as well. You have the Starship program and, all of the stuff that Elon's doing. You have the Dragon capsule, Falcon 9. Everybody's going into space these days. So many companies doing it. It's very exciting. But habitats, once you get there, you got to have somewhere to live. And the International Space Station is not a permanent solution, with plans to deorbit that in the next 10, 15 years or so. They keep extending the life because we have to build out these other solutions first, and we don't want to break that continuous time of having humans in orbit around our planet, especially as part of a joint effort from around the world. So we want to have some sort of solution that allows for individuals and companies and contractors and space agencies to continue that presence in orbit and continue research, because a lot of good comes from it. So lunar living is that next big step of putting habitats not just in orbit, but that one step farther where you got to take that translunar injection flight over and get captured in lunar orbit and set your feet down there on the surface and build your home base. So base camp concept here is what NASA was working on. So I'm going to talk through this a little bit. This was published back in October 28th of 2020, so it's nothing new. But for those that aren't as familiar with this industry or what's going on, I think it's a good topic to kind of start on here. So NASA's Artemis program has sparked excitement around the world and catalyzed new interest in exploring the moon as agencies prepare to land the first woman and next man on the lunar South Pole in 2024. Yeah, it didn't quite happen. But hey, we're still working and trucking towards it. So after that, NASA and its growing list of global partners will establish sustainable exploration by the end of the decade. We're still pushing for 2030s, early 2030s, end of 2020s to get humans up there. So really curious to see how that progresses. I'm optimistic that we'll be able to make it by the end of this decade or early 2030s. I think if we really push to get there, that with all these other companies and contributors here and global partners, that we will be able to make it happen. And yeah, that's kind of all I'll say on that one. So NASA will build on the momentum of that human return mission in 4 years and plans to send crew to the moon about once per year thereafter. To give astronauts a place to live and work on the moon, the agency's Artemis Base Camp concept includes modern lunar cabin and rover and even a mobile home. So we won't go too much into this one specifically, just because it's old and it's already changed, and kind of the whole progress of this is already off schedule. Obviously, we're 2025 right now. This is back in 2024. They were saying we'd already be there, but the goal has not quite changed. So here's a cool image, and for those that are listening, what we see here is there's a group of astronauts inspecting a rock on the lunar surface. They have that Lunar Terrain Vehicle, the LTV, to the right of them. Looks like they have some solar paneled torches that are pressed into the ground around them for visibility so that they can continue working on what they need to. They have this really cool looking rover that I've actually seen at the Kennedy Space Center, or something very similar to it, for kind of moving around. They have this kind of base camp structure here, and this is where it gets kind of interesting. The actual home, base camp, where they're going to live. How do you build something that allows you to survive in that harsh radiation environment? So we've talked about this a bunch, but we really haven't gone into too much detail about what those habitats would look like. Now, we're not going to talk too much about the radiation itself or the kind of fundamental details that would protect you from it, but we're going to go kind of high-level talk through a more abstracted version of that, of what that would look like. So let's look at some lunar habitats. So I just did a Google search here to see kind of sci-fi what people are looking at and designing. And you'll see a lot of these habitats are above the surface. Now, when you build a habitat above the surface rather than subsurface, you have different challenges, and those challenges are: how do you provide a material that protects the habitants, or the habitants, I don't know, the people inside, people who live inside the habitat. How do you protect them from the radiation environment? Because, as some of you may know, alpha particles and that will pass through many materials as if it was not there. And those particles, when they go through the human body, they mutate your genes and your, more or less, your DNA. And those mutations cause things like cancer, and at least increase the risk of cancer and whatnot. And no, 5G is not one of those things. For those that think so, that is completely false. More or less, you need something that is ionizing, such as like your microwave. There's a reason you have that screen on your microwave, and the reason it cooks your food, and that's because it's an ionizing radiation. So these radiations that live in cosmic space, there's ionizing radiation in there, and there's radiation that causes damage like this, and that is what you need to worry about. And that's what a lot of these structures more likely have issues providing protection against. So when you look at these other ones, they are subsurface. And you say, why would you build it under the surface? Does that not make it a bit more difficult? Now you need to drill or bring heavy machinery with you to build these things, and not necessarily. So this is where it gets kind of interesting. And this one's kind of neat here. This looks like a 3D printed structure, maybe out of lunar soil to create a cement. Also a great solution. The reason this is a great solution is you have a natural barrier that is able to protect you from the radiation environment. Well, how thick of that barrier do you need to create before it actually helps stop it? And based on the makeup of the lunar soil, I believe that is roughly about 1 meter or 3 feet-ish. I say ish because it's not direct. But yeah, it's about a meter's length, or 3 feet, that you need of that covering all sides of your structure to prevent that radiation from getting through and harming. So it is said that with that kind of layer of lunar soil surrounding a structure, that inside becomes kind of negligible, which become closer to what you'd expect living here on Earth, the same type of radiation. Now, if you were to be on the surface of the moon without any of that, your exposure, I believe, is about 200 times what we would expect to see here on Earth of dangerous radiation levels. And then that is about 2.5 to 3 times the exposure that you get on the space station. The space station's got pretty thin walls, and again, is part of the issue of why you can't spend super extended long periods of time on the International Space Station because you're exposed to radiation, you have buildup, and once you go past a certain acceptable, what we say is an acceptable buildup of radiation in the human body, then you should really no longer go into space after that point. So this is an interesting area of science for space travel that I don't think gets the attention really from the public that it needs. Everybody's really like, let's go, go, go. But this area, there's not many people looking into it. Now, there are people looking into it, obviously, including NASA and other key players. But a lot of the solutions up to this point have been just create a big barrier between you and what's kind of shooting those cosmic rays at you. And they do fly in a specific direction, more or less, based on different theories and whatnot. But I think even for the Starship, I think what Elon and their team said to kind of for the first couple missions that would go to Mars is put all the luggage in the back and have it point in a direction so that the cosmic rays would pass through that thickest section, all your luggage and everything like that, and create a barrier between you and those cosmic rays. And while that's a solution, it's not really a practical way of tackling the problem long term. You can't just always carry a huge, massive wall around you or lead barrier or something along those lines. Now, there are other materials out there that do help prevent radiation pass-through that are better at it than, say, your luggage. Water is actually a great one as well. But these things are heavy and hard to transport. So, looking at this one specifically, you can kind of see some cool dome structures. It looks like here they're filling on top the lunar regolith till it covers the top, and you have this kind of hobbit-looking home on the moon, which is kind of neat. This is actually Foster's and Partners. Foster's and Partners was a company created from the European Space Agency to look at building these lunar habitats. Now, I don't know what the current state is of this program or Foster and Partners. As I click on different links on here, many of them seem to be broken, but maybe somebody else has some more information on this or they've heard about it. If so, definitely leave it in the comments because I'm not too sure and haven't done much research on that one. But I want to show a YouTube video here, very quick one. This is a technology that I actually came across years and years ago, and it had nothing to do with space. It was actually a way to build structures fast here on Earth using very little tools and cheaply. And I was like, this would be a cool way to build a house. And I was younger and kind of forgot about it. And then I was thinking about building habitats on Mars and on the moon. And I was like, this would be a great technology to do that. And it looks like people are thinking that as well. So let's watch this video, and I want to get your thoughts on this.
Membrane until the structure expands like a bubble. Once the outer surface is wrapped with a layer of steel reinforcement, the framework of the house is complete. To simplify the construction process and reduce costs, this special dome-shaped housing technique was developed. The inflatable white membrane is made of geotextile. This is a new house construction method in the United States.
So they're saying it's a new house construction method. It's not. I saw this like maybe 10 years ago, maybe more. It's got to be more. It was before I lived in the United States. So it's got to be like maybe 15 years old that I saw this. Anyways, the idea would be that you have this inflatable structure that you send to the moon and a bunch of compressed air, some sort of gas that would then expand the structure, and that pretty much provides the shape of what you need to build. Rather than trying to build it by hand or send robots to do this, you could have a pre-built shape like this, and then you would just pile a bunch of lunar regolith on top. Now, I have other ideas with that you could automate the whole process so you don't have any humans in the loop here to build this out. But something I thought that's been super cool and wanted to share and see what thoughts others have, because the more minds we have looking into solving these problems, really the quicker we are going to be able to get some of these solutions out there. And it's really, this is a team effort. It doesn't matter if you work for SpaceX, Blue Origin, ULA, NASA, whatnot. The only way us as a species are ever going to make any real progress is if we all push each other to get there. So these space races and whatnot, as long as they are civilized, they are great to have because they really push the boundaries of what we know, what we think we're capable of, and the science as we know it today. Without anybody pushing, you get in this kind of stagnant place where no real new developments happen. People just live as it is. Look at aviation. Only recently have we started to see supersonic travel becoming a possibility again with boom supersonic. This was never a thing before. We had the the Concorde, and then they got rid of the Concorde, and like, okay, no more supersonic travel. We're not going to try and tackle the problem and see how we can make it better. We're just going to say we can't do it, and let's not do it anymore. And that was kind of the end of it. And all of our aircraft, even commercial aircraft, really the fundamentals of what they are has not changed. Nobody's really pushed the limits of it until more recently. Now, they obviously get a bit more pushing of the boundaries in the experimental world. But again, not so much as there used to be. The Rutan brothers, they developed these really cool aircraft like the Long Easy that were super efficient flyers. You burned very little fuel, got super quick like air speeds, and they had a range that was absolutely phenomenal, even to today's standards. And just all these different technologies, I feel like people really pushed the boundaries back in the day and then got stagnant as the main key players kind of left the scene. So I think we need to push and keep pushing, and maybe we'll talk a bit more about the aviation side of it. That definitely has a link to space in that, and maybe I'll talk a bit about kind of my background in aviation, both in the military and then here in the United States just as a private pilot, and what I've been exposed to through my work and whatnot. Maybe we can talk a bit more about some of the like off-the-shelf simulators like X-Plane and Microsoft Flight Sim and whatnot. There's definitely some cool tools out there. I keep on my desk. I have a throttle. I have a stick. I keep. I just recently got a Moza steering wheel. I love this type of stuff. It's a lot of fun and allows you to really visualize doing something before you have to physically go and do it, and get the feel for something. You can run through procedures and whatnot. So maybe we'll talk about that in another episode. But just want to do a quick one today, talk about some of these habitats, let you know what's going on in the world of space and space habitats, and looking at different ways of 3D printing and 3D printing on different planets. Now, 3D printing something like this, which is like FDM, which is kind of like your standard 3D printer at home, how you do things. You know, there's some other infrastructure you got to bring with you. So how do you do that? Do you send these autonomous robots up there that, you know, build this stuff for you? Do you send some other infrastructure up there? Do you go yourself and build this out? You know, there's a lot of different options, a lot of different use cases for it. I just want to be a part of some of it. So we'll see where this goes. I have some thoughts. I think it'd be a lot of fun. If other people are interested in this stuff, let me know. Let's have some chats about it. I'd love to have other people on this podcast as well and talk through, you know, what they think about this and their areas of specialty and whatnot, what skills they have, and kind of how they would tackle some of these problems, and have some fun conversations about it and theorizing and whatnot. Anyways, we'll leave it there. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. It was a quick one, and we kind of started with a bit off topic on electric cars, and maybe talked a bit too long about that. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed. Take care. Have a great weekend. And remember, stay curious. Keep looking up. I'll catch you all in the next one. Take care, everyone.